In this video, I want to talk about Africa in relation to everything that is going on around the world, from the UK to America. Just this morning, I listened to a presentation by the Vice President of America where he was addressing Europe, including the United Kingdom. And in that presentation, which I found interesting, he also touched on immigration, the need for countries to tighten their borders, and that immigration is out of control everywhere. A lot of people are relocating, especially because I'm talking about Africa in this video. I will refer to mostly Africans. A lot of Africans, myself included, we ran away from our countries because there are no jobs and our economies back home are not the best. We are still a little bit behind when it comes to that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So that's why I'm making this video. This video really is not so much a presentation. Of course, I'm going to give my opinions, my thoughts as to what I think needs to happen, my suggestions that is. But really, this video is about asking questions, thought-provoking questions, something to think about. So with everything that is happening, the UK closing its doors, Europe closing its doors, America also closing its doors because they are also changing their immigration laws over there. With all this, I'm looking at Africa now and I'm asking the questions. What are we to do? Like, is Africa ready to step up to the challenge? What is Africa going to do? Or what is Africa doing? Because a lot of things are changing. The other day as well, a few weeks ago, I made a video talking about the aid. We all know about Trump's aid, how he wants to cut aid to Africa. And I said in that video, this could be a blessing. In fact, it is a blessing. It is a blessing in disguise. I feel that that is exactly what Africa needs. And I can even go as far as saying what is happening right now, in terms of countries closing their doors to immigrants, and I'm referring to Africans in this case. What is happening? Yes, as much as it is painful, we are feeling the pain because, like I said, relocating for a better quality of life is a survival instinct. As much as that is painful, I feel that that is a necessary evil, especially when it comes to Africa, when it comes to our survival as Africans, when it comes to the continent itself. I feel that that is a necessary evil. Now, you might say that, oh, you're saying that because you relocated, you're in the UK, so you've got nothing to worry about. You're being selfish. I get it. I get it. Yeah, it might seem as if I'm being selfish because I'm settled here. That is fine. But I want to remind you as well that, yes, I'm here in the UK. Those people we've relocated. Remember, things are not all rosy here. I've been making videos talking about the cost of living crisis, the change in political climate, and what immigrants face on a daily basis. Some of the things we don't talk about. There are things that are hard to talk about, especially on a public forum. But trust me when I say that, not everyone who's living abroad is happy, because who doesn't want to live in the sun? As far as I'm concerned, melanated people are not meant to live in such a climate, cold climate. First of all, it is not good for our melanin in terms of health. We need the vitamin D more than the other people. So money is not everything. And mind you, the money that we earn, it comes with strings attached as well. So there's a lot to consider, because having a good quality of life is not just about money. Here we are working to survive. That is all. So when you look at people in the diaspora, I want you to consider what could be happening behind the scenes. So anyway, going back to the issue of Africa as a continent, given the changes that are happening in the world, I'm asking the question, is Africa ready to step up to the challenge? The obvious thing that I want to mention is the fact that Africa is everything that it needs. We've got our natural resources, and we know that the whole world relies on Africa when it comes to resources. That just goes to show how rich that continent is. But we know the problem that we have in Africa. We have corruption. Corruption has become an issue. It has become an urgent issue that needs to be addressed. Our leaders, people in high places, people who should be looking after those resources, guarding them, making sure that the continent benefits from those resources, they are not doing that. I'm giving my opinion, the way I'm seeing things. So I'm saying, corruption is killing our continent, and that needs to be addressed if we are to stop running, because clearly other countries no longer want us. And also, speaking of our leaders and in terms of corruption, our children are growing up looking at those leaders being corrupt, stealing from the people, not doing enough. Those are the very people who, when they become leaders themselves, when they start working, will also become corrupt. Africa is rotting because our leaders are not leading by example. They are not setting a good example for our young people, for the future generation. So it then becomes another vicious cycle because there is really no one who is showing the people how things are done properly. We have got no values, no principles. We are not upholding standards, good standards for our society. So unfortunately, this is why Africa is crumbling. And I'm going back to that question. Is Africa really ready to step up to this challenge? And also, I feel that there's a general lack of vision in Africa. If Africa is well organized, well governed, with leaders who have got integrity, we can do so much better than we are doing now. I'm not saying that there's no improvement that is happening, but whatever is happening is not nearly enough to move with the times, the change in times. That is what I'm talking about. We need to move at a much better pace than we are moving. And also, I want to talk about this dependency mindset. The fact that some of us were freaking out when Donald Trump announced that he was cutting aid to Africa. The fact that some people were worried, saying, what are we going to do now? And it was like a big issue. It was as if life has ended. That very fact alone shows that, there's a real problem that needs to be addressed in Africa. We shouldn't have to be at other people's mercy. We shouldn't have to rely on other countries to the point that they can just cut things off just like that. And we are left on our knees. That shouldn't happen. It's not right. It means that something has gone wrong somewhere. And that is why I'm asking, is Africa ready to step up to the challenge, considering everything that is happening, the changes that are happening? Because right now there's a global shift that is happening. If you're paying attention, then you know what I'm talking about. So now is the time for Africa to really pay attention, not just pay attention, but to do something about, to step up its game, to look after its people. Because here's the thing, Western countries owe Africa nothing. Yes, we can talk about the sins of the past, but when it's all said and done, they'll always put the interest of their people first. So is Africa going to put the interest of Africans first? Migration cannot be the only strategy that Africans have because they've got no choice but to migrate. If migration or if relocating to another country is the only option that an African child has, that person who is at college, who is in school, if that is the only survival strategy that is left, then because at the end of the day, Africa's best minds are moving away from Africa. Yes, some people have argued that Africa has got enough people, but I say that those are the things we say to make ourselves feel better. Yes, there are people left in Africa. Africa still has brilliant minds there, don't get me wrong. But if we are also to be honest with ourselves, some of the most brilliant minds are outside of Africa. They are helping other countries develop because unfortunately their skills were not being fully utilized because of lack of opportunities back home. And if someone is skilled, if someone has been to school and they can't find a job, what do you expect them to do? Of course, they're going to run away because they have to survive as well. So this is why I'm asking, is Africa ready to step up its game, to step up to the challenge? Because if Africa keeps losing, doctors, nurses, engineers, all those brilliant minds, then who is going to help develop Africa back home? Yes, I know the old argument that, people who are outside of Africa help bring remittances back home. But how long are we going to keep saying that? How long are we going to keep making that an excuse? I mean, what do you think? Yes, I've also talked about remittances as well in one of my videos, and I also justified. I'm one of those people who's always talking about remittances, saying that people in the diaspora do their part in terms of sending remittances. But if we are to be honest, how much of that money goes towards developing Africa? How much of that money goes towards, setting up companies, things that help on a long-term basis? Because the way I see it, most of the money that we send to Africa goes towards things like food, clothes, sending people to school. The same people who then up and leave the moment they graduate, the moment they finish school, they are on the first flight to the UK, to the United States, to Australia. Then it becomes a vicious cycle. We are not going anywhere. And the issue that I see there is because there are no opportunities. This is why I'm saying Africa is failing its people. Our leaders are not doing enough to keep the talent in the continent. They are not doing enough to persuade those people to stay. There's nothing to stay for, or there's nothing attractive to make people stay. Because for people to stay, there has to be opportunities. There has to be something to live for, a future to look forward to. But because they are not seeing that future, people have got no choice but to leave. And I'm going back to that question. Is Africa really ready to step up to this challenge? Again, the world is changing. Now is not the time to be on shaky ground. Again, another argument that we often talk about is the fact that, yes, moving away from Africa, going to other countries exposes us to new experiences, new ways of doing things, and we learn new skills and so on. And we can then go back to Africa, use those skills to improve Africa. Yes, that is an argument, and it's a valid point. But how many of our people, skilled people, engineers, doctors, nurses like myself, how many of us are actually going back home to inject those skills? How many of our people are actually doing that? I'm not saying that people are not doing that. People are building companies, they're studying things and so on. But what I'm saying, I'm talking about the scale, the percentage in proportion to the people who are actually leaving Africa. How many are actually going back to inject back into Africa? I'm not excluding myself, by the way. This is a conversation that I'm starting, because we need to be realistic. We need to be honest with ourselves sometimes. So I'm saying, yes, as much as there are benefits to migration, how much benefit is it really? Aren't we just going to retire back to Africa when we go? Are we not just going during our sunset years? How many people are going back to Africa when they are still in their 40s, 50s? Because at least you still be active enough to actually, utilize those skills actively. So the question is migration making Africa stronger or weaker, when it's all said and done? And another argument as well, when we talk about everything that is happening and the fact that Africans are leaving Africa in droves, going to Western countries, people may argue that the UK and Western countries actually contributed to Africa's problem, considering things like colonialism, exploitation, because Africa is being exploited as we speak. So yeah, that is the argument. Looking at all that, yes, we can argue that the Western world contributed to Africa's problem, and I'm not dismissing that. But also, at the same time, can we continue to make that an excuse to not actually step up to the challenge? Can we continue to let that stop us from doing what is necessary, what we need to do as Africans, as Africa, to actually improve our situation? Because if the West is closing its doors, we can also put a stop to the exploitation. We can also put a stop to some of what we've allowed, those things that are contributing to making Africa poor. We can also put a stop to that. People might also argue that the UK and the Western world still profits from Africa in terms of cheap labor, resources, and all that. So why act as if all of a sudden Africa is a burden, like Africans are now a burden? Why act like that? People may ask, in all fairness, shouldn't the UK be grateful? People may ask. And I go back, to the beginning where I talked about the current situation, the problems. The problem is countries like the UK are saying they can no longer cope. That is what they are saying. They are saying the population is too high. When we look at the resources, housing, and so on, That is the issue. So yeah, given everything that I've said, I mean, as much as we like to complain, we talk about our challenges, how everything is unfair, how tired we are, we might complain. But I'm saying, at what point is Africa going to start taking responsibility for its own future? So in conclusion, what I'm saying is, it is time for Africa, it is time for Africans, all of us, Africans in the diaspora, our leaders, every citizen, it is time for us to take responsibility, do our part to ensure that Africa survives, to ensure that Africa really rise to the occasion. We need to step up to the challenge of the 21st century. So yeah, I don't know what you think about everything that I've said. I've said a lot, and yeah, it's food for thought, because I'm looking at everything that is happening in the world, the changes that are taking place, and I'm asking myself, what is Africa going to do about this?